The phone buzzed at 11:36 p.m., but Sonia Phillip didn't hear it. She was deep in sleep, dreaming of easier days when her 16-year-old son Jake still ran to her with scraped knees and broken toys. The second buzz pulled her from slumber. The third made her heart skip. In the darkness of her bedroom, Sonia's fingers fumbled for her phone. A notification glowed. Voice message from Jake's phone. Her blood turned to ice. Jake never sent voice notes. He barely spoke to her anymore, let alone at midnight. With trembling fingers, she pressed play. "Mom," Jake's voice cracked through the speaker, raw and broken. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry for everything. For being such a disappointment. For not being the son you deserved." His words came between ragged sobs. "I can't do this anymore. The pain. It's too much. By the time you hear this, I'll be gone. Please don't blame yourself. You were the only good thing in my life." The message ended with a soft beep that echoed like a gunshot in the silent room. Sonia's phone clattered to the floor as her world collapsed. Her lungs refused to work. Her heart hammered against her ribs like a caged bird desperate to escape. This couldn't be real. This had to be some cruel nightmare. "Jake!" Her scream tore through the house. As she stumbled out of bed, her legs weak as water, she ran down the hallway, her bare feet slapping against the cold hardwood. His bedroom door stood slightly open, just as it had been when she'd kissed his forehead hours ago, when he pretended to be asleep. The room was empty. His bed, still made. The window, wide open, curtains dancing in the night breeze like ghostly fingers beckoning her son into the darkness. Sonia's knees buckled. Her baby was out there somewhere planning to... No, she wouldn't let her mind finish that thought. She had to find him. She had to save him. But where do you look when your child has given up on tomorrow?
Sonia stood in Jake's doorway, her chest heaving as panic clawed at her throat. Every instinct screamed at her to run out into the night, to search every street corner, every dark alley. But she forced herself to stop, to think, to look for clues that might tell her where her son had gone to die. The room that had once been filled with superhero posters and toy cars now felt like a stranger space. Dark walls, heavy curtains, and an atmosphere so thick with despair she could taste it. How had she missed this? How had she failed to see her own child drowning right under her nose? With shaking hands, she switched on the light. The sudden brightness revealed details that made her stomach lurch. Scattered across his desk were crumpled test papers, all failures. Math, English, history, red ink bleeding across every page like wounds. When had he started hiding these from her? Sonia opened his desk drawer, her heart pounding. Inside, she found a journal bound in black leather, its pages worn from desperate hands. She opened it with the reverence of someone handling a sacred text, knowing she was about to glimpse into her son's soul. Day 127. They made another video today, me tripping in the cafeteria. 50,000 views already. The comments, I can't read them anymore. Day 134. Mom asked if I was okay. I almost told her everything, but she looked so tired already. How could I add my problems to hers? Day 148. I used to dream of being an artist. Now I can't even draw with my hand shaking. They've killed everything beautiful in me. Each entry was a dagger to Sonia's heart. Her son had been documenting his descent into hell, and she had been oblivious. Page after page revealed a boy crushed under the weight of cruelty, academic failure, and isolation. At the bottom of the drawer, she found his sketchbook. The pages were filled with drawings that made her weep. Self-portraits showing a boy made of shadows, faces twisted in torment, and on the last page, a figure standing on the edge of a cliff, arms spread wide, as if ready to fly or fall. Sonia's phone buzzed. A text from Jake's number. Check social media, see what they did to me, then you'll understand. Her blood turned to ice. He was still alive, but for how long? With trembling fingers, Sonia opened Jake's laptop. The screen blazed to life, revealing a digital nightmare that explained everything. Her son's social media accounts were flooded with cruelty that made her physically sick. The first video hit her like a physical blow. Jake walking through the school hallway, books in hand, when someone stuck out their foot. He crashed to the ground, papers flying everywhere, his lunch splashing across the floor. But it wasn't the fall that broke Sonia's heart, it was the sound of laughter. Dozens of voices laughing as her son scrambled to collect his scattered dignity. The comments below were even worse. Loser, can't even walk straight. How is this kid still alive? Natural selection should have taken him by now. Maybe he should just disappear forever. Nobody would miss him anyway. Sonia scrolled through post after post, Jake being mocked for his art, Jake eating alone in the cafeteria while people took photos, Jake's failed presentation being recorded and shared with cruel commentary. Each post had hundreds of likes, shares, and comments that grew progressively more vicious. But the worst discovery was yet to come. As Sonia dug deeper, she found messages between Jake and people she thought were his friends. Henry, who came to their house for dinner, Chloe, who she'd driven to school concerts, Tyler, who Jake had defended when other kids picked on him. The messages revealed the truth. They had never been his friends. They were part of the campaign to destroy him. Henry, dude, did you see how many views the cafeteria video got? Jake's such a meme now. Chloe, I almost feel bad. Nah, who am I kidding? He deserves it for thinking he could be popular. Tyler, my followers are asking for more Jake content. Should we film him crying next? Sonia's heart shattered into a million pieces. The betrayal ran deeper than she could have imagined. These weren't strangers attacking her son. These were kids he'd trusted, kids he'd called friends, kids she'd welcomed into their home. She scrolled frantically through his recent activity, looking for any clue about where he might have gone. Then she saw it. A location check-in posted 30 minutes ago at Riverside Bridge, the old bridge overlooking the deepest part of the river 20 miles outside town. Sonia didn't waste another second. She grabbed her car keys, her phone, and ran into the night. But as she started the engine, a terrible thought struck her. What if she was already too late? The digital clock on her dashboard read 12:23 a.m. How long had he been there? How long did she have?
Sonia's car tore through the empty streets like a bullet fired from desperation itself. Every red light felt like an eternity. Every turn took her further from safety and closer to her worst nightmare. The radio played softly, but all she could hear was Jake's voice from that message. By the time you hear this, I'll be gone. No, she wouldn't let those be his last words. She couldn't. As she drove, memories flooded her mind like a broken dam. Jake at 5 years old, running into her arms after his first day of kindergarten, his face beaming with stories about finger painting and new friends. Jake at 8, presenting her with a drawing he'd made, a crayon masterpiece of their family standing under a rainbow with the words, "I love you, Mommy," written in wobbly letters across the top. When had that bright, beautiful boy become the broken teenager she'd failed to save? The answer came to her in waves of guilt. It had started 2 years ago, after the divorce. David had left them for his secretary, taking half their income and all of Jake's sense of security. Sonia had worked double shifts at the hospital, trying to keep their home, trying to provide stability, but while she was saving other people's children, her own son was drowning. She'd missed the signs, the grades slipping from A's to C's to F's, the friends who stopped calling, the art supplies gathering dust in the corner of his room, the way he'd started wearing hoodies even in summer, hiding from the world. "I'm sorry, baby. Mommy's sorry she didn't see." The highway stretched endlessly before her, each mile marker counting down to potential tragedy. She'd called his phone 17 times, straight to voicemail. She'd texted him every promise she could think of, every plea that might reach through his pain. But silence was her only answer. 20 minutes into the drive, Sonia realized she was praying. Words she hadn't spoken since she was a child poured from her heart. "Please, God, if you're listening, don't let me lose him. He's all I have. He's everything. I'll do anything, be anything, change anything. Just please don't take my baby." The bridge appeared in the distance like a dark skeleton against the starlit sky. Sonia's heart stopped. There at the center of the span was a small figure silhouetted against the night. Even from this distance, she knew that posture, those shoulders that had once been so straight with pride and now were curved with defeat. Jake! Her son was standing at the edge of everything and she was still 5 minutes away. Sonia pressed the accelerator to the floor, her prayer becoming a scream. "Hold on, baby. Mommy's coming. Please, just hold on."
Sonia abandoned her car at the bridge entrance, leaving the door open, the keys still dangling from the ignition. None of that mattered now. Only Jake mattered, only reaching him before he made a decision that could never be undone. Her feet pounded against the concrete as she ran toward the center of the bridge. Each step echoed in the night like a heartbeat, counting down to tragedy. 50 yards, 30 yards, 20 yards. She could see him clearly now. his thin frame outlined against the stars, his hands gripping the railing so tightly his knuckles were white. "Jake," she called out, her voice carrying across the water below. "Baby, don't move. Mommy's here." He turned at the sound of her voice, and Sonia's heart shattered completely. His face was streaked with tears, his eyes hollow and defeated. This wasn't her little boy anymore. This was someone the world had broken so thoroughly that death seemed like mercy. "Stay away from me, Mom," Jake said, his voice barely audible over the wind. "It's better this way. You won't have to be embarrassed by me anymore." Sonia forced herself to stop 10 feet away, knowing that if she moved too quickly, if she scared him, she might lose him forever. Her nursing training kicked in. She talked people through trauma before, but never her own child, never with stakes this high. "Jake, sweetheart, I need you to listen to me," she said, keeping her voice as calm as possible while her world crumbled. "You are not an embarrassment. You have never been an embarrassment. You are my heart walking around outside my body." Jake laughed, but it was a broken sound that cut through Sonia like glass. "Did you see the videos, Mom? Did you see what they did to me? The whole world thinks I'm a joke. Even my friends, they were never my friends. They were just using me for entertainment." "I saw," Sonia whispered, taking a tiny step closer. "And it broke my heart. Not because I was embarrassed of you, but because I wasn't there to protect you. Because I failed you when you needed me most. No, Mom, I failed you. Look at my grades. Look at my art. I can't even draw anymore without my hand shaking. I had dreams once, remember? I wanted to create beautiful things, but they've killed everything good in me." The wind picked up and Jake swayed slightly. Sonia's breath caught in her throat. Time was running out. "You want to know what I remember?" Sonia said, her voice growing stronger. "I remember a 5-year-old boy who drew me a rainbow because he wanted to make me smile after a hard day at work. I remember a 10-year-old who spent his allowance on flowers when I was sick with the flu. I remember a 12-year-old who hugged me every night and told me I was the best mom in the world." Jake's shoulders began to shake. "That boy is gone, Mom. They killed him." "No," Sonia said firmly, taking another step. "That boy is still there. He's hurt, he's scared, but he's still there. And he's my son. He's my beautiful, talented, amazing son, and I will not let anyone, not bullies, not cruel kids, not even you, tell me he doesn't deserve to live." For a moment, the only sound was the river flowing far below. Then Jake spoke, his voice so small and broken, it was almost lost in the wind. "I'm so tired, Mom. I'm so tired of hurting." Sonia felt her heart break and heal at the same time. He was listening. He was still there, still fighting, still her little boy who needed his mommy to chase away the monsters. "I know, baby. I know you're tired. But you don't have to carry this alone anymore. Let Mommy help you. Let me fight for you the way I should have been fighting all along." Jake's grip on the railing loosened slightly, and Sonia held her breath. This was the moment. This was where her son would choose life or death, hope or despair. And in the silence between heartbeats, something miraculous happened.
In that moment between desperation and surrender, between life and death, something impossible happened. The wind died to a whisper, the world grew still, and in the silence, Jake heard something that changed everything. A voice, gentle, familiar, singing words he'd forgotten he knew.
I will never leave you nor forsake you. My precious child, you are loved. I will never leave you nor forsake you. It was his mother's voice, but not from the bridge where she stood. This voice came from memory, from a time when the world was safe and love was simple. He was 7 years old again, burning with fever, and his mother was sitting beside his bed in the dark, stroking his hair and singing the old hymn that her grandmother had sung to her. I will never leave you nor forsake you. The memory hit him with such force that Jake gasped, his eyes flying wide. Suddenly, he wasn't alone on this bridge. He was surrounded by every moment his mother had chosen him, had loved him, had believed in him. Every bedtime story, every proud smile at his art shows, every time she'd picked him up from school early because she could tell he'd had a bad day. Every whispered prayer she'd said over his sleeping form, prayers he'd never known she was praying. Sonia saw the change in her son's face before she understood what was happening. His expression shifted from despair to wonder, as if he was seeing something she couldn't see, hearing something beyond her perception. "Jake?" she whispered. "Baby, what is it?" He turned to look at her, and for the first time in months, she saw her little boy looking back. "Mom," he said, his voice filled with awe. I remember the song." And then, impossibly, Jake began to sing. His voice was rough from crying, broken from pain, but it carried the ancient words with a power that made Sonia's knees weak. I will never leave you nor forsake you. My precious child, you are loved. I will never leave you nor forsake you. It was his mother's voice, but not from the bridge where she stood. This voice came from memory, from a time when the world was safe and love was simple. He was 7 years old again, burning with fever, and his mother was sitting beside his bed in the dark, stroking his hair and singing the old hymn that her grandmother had sung to her. I will never leave you nor forsake you. The memory hit him with such force that Jake gasped, his eyes flying wide. Suddenly, he wasn't alone on this bridge. He was surrounded by every moment his mother had chosen him, had loved him, had believed in him. Every bedtime story, every proud smile at his art shows, every time she'd picked him up from school early because she could tell he'd had a bad day. Every whispered prayer she'd said over his sleeping form, prayers he'd never known she was praying. Sonia saw the change in her son's face before she understood what was happening. His expression shifted from despair to wonder, as if he was seeing something she couldn't see, hearing something beyond her perception. "Jake?" she whispered. "Baby, what is it?" He turned to look at her, and for the first time in months, she saw her little boy looking back. "Mom," he said, his voice filled with awe. I remember the song." And then impossibly, Jake began to sing. His voice was rough from crying, broken from pain, but it carried the ancient words with a power that made Sonia's knees weak. I will never leave you nor forsake you. My precious child, you are loved. I will never leave you nor forsake you. Sonia's eyes filled with tears as the memory crashed over her too. All those nights when Jake was small and sick or scared, she'd sung that hymn to him. Her own mother had sung it to her, and her grandmother before that. It was a chain of love passed down through generations, a promise that love endures even in the darkest moments. You used to sing that to me, Jake said, stepping back from the railing, his voice full of wonder. Every night when I was little, you'd sit by my bed until I fell asleep, and you'd sing about how God would never leave me. I still do, Sonia whispered. Even now, even when you're too old to know about it, I still come to your room some nights and whisper prayers over you. I still ask God to watch over you, to keep you safe, to help you remember how much you're loved. Jake stared at his mother, understanding flooding his features. Your prayers, they never stopped? Never, not once. Even when I was working late shifts, even when you pushed me away, even when I thought I was failing you completely, I never stopped praying for you, never stopped believing in you, never stopped loving you. The truth hit Jake like a wave of warm light.
all this time, when he'd felt most alone, most forgotten, most worthless, love had been surrounding him. His mother's love, and something bigger, something divine that had used her voice, her memory, her presence to call him back from the edge. Jake took another step away from the railing, then another, and then he was running, not toward the edge, but toward his mother, toward love, toward life. Sonia caught him as he fell into her arms, both of them sobbing, both of them whole again. He was taller than her now, but in that moment he was her little boy again, safe in Mommy's arms, protected by love that was stronger than death. "I'm sorry, Mom," Jake cried into her shoulder. "I'm so sorry. I almost... Shh," Sonia whispered, holding him tight enough to keep his pieces together. "You don't have to apologize. You're here. You're alive. That's all that matters." As they held each other on that bridge, Sonia heard something that made her heart soar. Jake was humming, very softly, the old hymn. The words his great-great-grandmother had sung were being passed to another generation, carrying with them the promise that love endures, that hope survives, that God's voice echoes through the generations in the whispered prayers of mothers who refuse to give up. Sometimes, a parent's whispered prayers echo louder than despair.
The weeks that followed were not easy, but they were filled with something Jake had almost forgotten: hope. Sonia took leave from her nursing job to focus on what mattered most, helping her son heal. They started with a therapist who specialized in teenage depression and cyberbullying. Dr. Phillip was a gentle woman who helped Jake understand that the cruelty he'd experienced was not his fault, that his worth was not determined by the opinions of people who didn't know his heart. Hurt people, Dr. Phillip explained during one session. The kids who attacked you online were dealing with their own pain, their own insecurities. That doesn't excuse their behavior, but it helps us understand that their cruelty says nothing about you and everything about their own broken places. Jake still struggled with the shame. The videos were still online, the comments still there for anyone to see. But slowly, with his mother's help and Dr. Phillip's guidance, he began to reclaim his story. "What if," Sonia suggested one evening as they sat together at the kitchen table, "instead of hiding from what happened, we use it to help other kids who are going through the same thing?" Jake looked up from his sketch pad. He'd started drawing again, tentatively at first, but with growing confidence. "What do you mean?" "I mean, what if your pain becomes someone else's hope? What if your story saves another kid who's standing on a bridge somewhere?" The idea took root slowly. Jake began writing about his experience, creating a blog where he shared his journey from despair to healing. He wrote about the voice note that nearly became his suicide note, about the friends who betrayed him, about the moment on the bridge when he heard his mother's song. But most importantly, he wrote about what came after, about the hard work of healing, about learning to see himself through eyes of love instead of eyes of cruelty, about discovering that his dreams weren't dead, they were just wounded and needed time to heal. The blog gained followers, not the cruel kind who had tormented him before, but kids who were hurting, parents who were scared, teachers who wanted to help. Jake's words became a lifeline for others drowning in digital cruelty. One message changed everything. "I read your blog last night when I was about to give up. I was holding a bottle of pills, ready to swallow them all. But then I read about your mom's song, and I remembered my dad used to sing to me when I was little. I put the pills away. I'm getting help. Thank you for showing me that hope is possible." Jake showed the message to his mother, tears streaming down his face. "Mom, someone else is alive because of what we went through." Sonia wrapped her arms around her son, her heart overflowing with pride and gratitude. That's what love does, baby. It takes our worst moments and transforms them into someone else's greatest hope. At school, things began to change too. Jake's story had spread, and while some kids still whispered, others approached him with apologies, with their own stories of being bullied, with requests to help them find the same hope he'd found. Even Henry, one of his former tormentors, cornered Jake by the lockers one day. "I saw your blog," he said, his face red with shame. I
I didn't know how bad things got for you. I was dealing with my own stuff at home, and I guess I took it out on you. That's not an excuse, but I'm sorry. Really sorry." Jake could have held on to his anger. He could have let bitterness take root and poison his healing. Instead, he chose something harder but more powerful: forgiveness. "I forgive you," Jake said simply. "We all mess up. What matters is what we do next." Henry nodded, tears in his eyes. "What can I do to make it right?" "Help me help others," Jake said. "Use your social media to spread kindness instead of cruelty. Be the friend to someone else that you couldn't be to me." And Henry did. He became one of Jake's biggest supporters, sharing the blog, standing up for kids who were being picked on, using his influence to create a culture of kindness instead of cruelty. As spring turned to summer, Jake's art teacher approached him with an opportunity. "There's a contest for young artists who've overcome adversity," she said. "I think you should enter." Jake's first instinct was to say no, but then he remembered his mother's words. What if your pain becomes someone else's hope? He created a piece called The Bridge, a stunning charcoal drawing that showed a figure standing not on the edge of destruction, but on the bridge between despair and hope, with light breaking through storm clouds above. At the bottom, he wrote the words that saved his life: "I will never leave you nor forsake you." He won first place. At the award ceremony, Jake was asked to speak. As he looked out at the audience, his mother in the front row, tears of pride streaming down her face, he found his voice. "6 months ago, I stood on a bridge and almost chose death over life. I was broken by cruelty, defeated by betrayal, convinced that I had no value in this world. But love found me there in my darkest moment. Love in the form of my mother's prayers, love in the form of an old hymn, love in the form of second chances and new beginnings." The audience was completely silent, hanging on every word. Today, I want to tell anyone who's listening, your pain has purpose. Your story has power. Your life has value that no amount of cruelty can diminish. And if you're standing on your own bridge right now, please remember someone is praying for you. Someone is fighting for you. Someone loves you more than you know. Jake held up his winning artwork. "This is my bridge. Not the place where I almost ended my story, but the place where my real story began. The place where I learned that sometimes God's loudest voice is a mother's whispered prayer." The overwhelming standing ovation lasted 5 minutes.
2 years later, Sonia Phillips stood in her garden watching her son through the kitchen window. Jake was sitting at the table, laptop open, responding to messages from kids around the world who had read his story and found hope. His blog had grown into a website, then a movement, then a nonprofit organization dedicated to preventing teen suicide through the power of love and faith. He was 18 now, preparing for college where he would study both art and psychology, planning to become an art therapist who could use creativity to heal broken hearts. His face had lost the hollow look of despair and gained something even more beautiful, the glow of someone who had found his purpose in his pain. The phone rang, pulling Sonia from her thoughts. It was Jake's voice, but not her Jake, another teenager, another mother's son, calling the crisis line that Jake's organization had established. "Hello," she heard Jake say, his voice patient and kind. "My name is Jake, and I'm here to listen. Whatever you're going through, you don't have to face it alone." Sonia smiled through her tears. This was what redemption looked like. This was how God turned mourning into dancing, ashes into beauty, despair into hope. The cyberbullying that had nearly killed her son had instead become the very thing that equipped him to save others. The broken dreams had been rebuilt into something stronger. The voice note that was meant to be goodbye had become hello to thousands of hurting kids around the world. But the greatest miracle of all was simpler than that. It was the sound of laughter coming from the kitchen, the sight of sketch pads filled with beautiful art, the knowledge that her son woke up each morning grateful to be alive. As the sun set over their small town, Sonia whispered the same prayer she'd whispered every night for 20 years. "Thank you, God, for my son. Help him to remember always that he is loved, that he has purpose, that you will never leave him nor forsake him."
The prayer rose into the evening air, joining the chorus of millions of other parents around the world who refuse to stop believing in their children, refuse to stop fighting for them, refuse to stop loving them even when they can't love themselves. Sometimes those prayers seem to fall on deaf ears. Sometimes it feels like love isn't enough, like faith is foolish, like hope is just another word for denial. But Sonia knew the truth now. She had seen it with her own eyes on a bridge 2 years ago. Love is never wasted, prayers are never unheard, and sometimes a parent's whispered words of faith echo louder than all the world's cruelty combined. In the kitchen, Jake finished his phone call and looked up at his mother through the window. He smiled, not the forced smile he used to give her when he was trying to hide his pain, but a real smile, full of joy and purpose. He held up his latest drawing, a mother and son standing together on a bridge, not looking down into the darkness below, but up toward a sky full of stars and infinite possibilities. At the bottom of the drawing, in beautiful script, were the words that had saved his life and would save countless others. "I will never leave you nor forsake you." Sonia pressed her hand to the window and mouthed the words, "I love you." Jake pressed his hand to the glass on the other side and mouthed back, "I know." And in that simple exchange, the circle of love continued, the chain of faith remained unbroken, the promise passed from generation to generation held true. Love endures, hope survives, and God's word never returns void. This is the story of a voice note that almost became a goodbye, but instead became a hello to new life. It's the story of a mother's love that refused to give up even when all hope seemed lost. It's the story of how our darkest moments can become someone else's greatest light. If you are listening to this story and you are standing on your own bridge, whether it's made of concrete and steel or built from despair and pain, please remember this. Someone is praying for you. Someone is fighting for you. Someone loves you more than all the darkness in the world. Your story is not over. Your pain has purpose. Your life has value that no amount of cruelty can diminish. Sometimes a parent's whispered prayers echo louder than despair. Sometimes God's loudest voice is love refusing to let go. Sometimes the end of hope is actually just the beginning of miracles.